Man, hey, good morning, everybody. It's always a little nerve-wracking being up here. I don't know how Christian does it every week, so he's amazing. How many of you guys are getting into the Christmas spirit? You guys liking that? Yesterday, I took my family and my sister, who's visiting from Chicago. Hey, Ruth. We went to go to Upper Hastings Ranch, where my neighborhood is, to look at the Christmas lights. As you guys know, that neighborhood was decimated by the fires. And my favorite thing was the sign up front, which says, "We lost 80 homes, but does not dim our Christmas spirit." And we could see the resilience in our neighborhood, and that was really awesome to see. But that's what we're feeling as we're approaching Christmas this year. I want to start off with a question for you guys, even as we're in Advent season. Have you guys ever been on the edge of your seat waiting for something? Yeah. Some of you guys are waiting for test results, or some of you guys are in job interviews waiting for a response, or extra innings at a World Series. Sorry, I triggered some trauma. This past January, unbeknownst to me, I was in the wait of my entire life. As you guys know, this January, we were expecting our fifth kid. Duke, and we were really excited, and we were on the edge of our seats. The challenge with the fifth kid is that, Esther has done amazing giving birth to 4 kids. Shout out to Esther. With the fifth one, I was like, this one's going to fly out of her. Sorry, that's graphic. So his due date was January 16th, and it was beginning of the year, and the whole family's just on edge, waiting. And here's the conflict. Our 4th kid, Titan, his birthday's January 12th. And for some reason, I was like, the last thing I want is to have twin birthdays, which I found out is only a problem when you have a lot of kids. Where, after a certain point, you run out of months to do it, right? There's 12 months, and at some point, they might collide. Well, there's a real chance that it was going to collide. And so we were, on the edge of the seats, and in my head, I was just like, yo, girl, just hold on. Don't let that thing fly out, just hold on. They got to have separate birthdays. Well, it turns out there was a bigger issue at play. On January 7th, I get a text from my good friend Brandon, who's also here, whose wife just gave birth this week. I get a text from him that says, hey, man, there's a fire in your neighborhood. You got to go check it out. And so I was like, all right, cool, we'll check it out. I was like, hey, girl, just still bathe the kids. I'm going to go drive out and see what's going on with this fire. I pull in my car. I pull out. As I pull out, I don't even make it to the street. For on my street, there's a huge mountain, and it is completely ablaze. I pull right back into my house, and everything within me as a dad is coming alive at this point. I very calmly tell everybody, pack your bags. We got to go. This would be fine, except the fact that my wife was 9 months pregnant, and she could be delivering literally any moment. So we evacuate our house. There is just the craziest scene. The whole mountain is ablaze. We live in Upper Hastings Ranch, so just next to the foothills. We see fire and ash and wind everywhere. Getting texts from friends that the fire has touched down in the houses. And we are scrambling to find a place to land. Thank God, our good friend let us stay in their back house. And for the next 24 hours, I was not sure of a few things. Whether, number one, whether my house was still alive. And number two, whether I could leave my 4 kids somewhere so that I could bring my wife to the labor and delivery, because it can come any minute. And my stress levels were really high. Thankfully, the first night, nothing happened. We settled fine. Friends were great. We worshiped, but there's anxiousness in my heart. There's the pressures of being a dad and the care of my home. The next week was me driving back and forth between the guest house and my home, brushing the brush off my house, hosing it down, collecting important documents. Also balancing the fact that we're in a stranger's house. And when you have a lot of kids, you feel a little self-conscious that you're making a mess or it happens, They're being rowdy or they're not being respectful. On top of that, I have my day job. And on top of that, you hear of people that actually lost their homes, Friends Lamar, Matt, good friends hearing that they lost their homes. And the anxiety of, do I have a home to bring my fifth kid to? It was just finished Christmas, and I literally, this is what Jesus felt like. There's or Mary and Joseph, rather. There's, no home to bring them. And just the week, the pressure of mounting back and forth, and not sure. The one thing on my mind was I needed a place for my kid to get born. I did not want my baby to be born in a stranger's home. And I was like, I really wanted to. So at some point, thank God, they lifted the evacuation orders in my sector. And as soon as that happened, I got to work. And I got air purifiers all over the house. I was struggling to find a cleaner, and nobody could come. And I don't know if you guys know Rocky from our church that used to be here. She gathered all her friends and said, I was looking for someone like you. And she came to my house and cleaned the whole house. That really touched me. And so finally we were like, okay, evacuation orders are lifted. Let's move back in. As soon as we moved back, was left with really unfortunate news. I found out water was not potable. And as soon as I came back, they didn't tell us this, but they had to turn off the gas. So I was like, we can do this. We can survive. I have a gas top stove, and people were offering to do a laundry, which if you have 4 kids, is actually the worst part because your dryer doesn't work, and I ain't hanging no clothes on no strings, I'll tell you that. I'm not that hood. Okay. So we moved back, and thank God, we moved back around the 12th of January. It's as you know, it's Titan's birthday. And I remember being home for the first time after a while, celebrating Titan's birthday. We got a cake. And, kids, they don't know what's going on. And this little 2-year-old just got the dopiest smile just as we were singing happy birthday. That was my first time crying that year. Just everything you work for to see that moment. Unfortunately, the next morning, I was woken up with not good news. I woke up with my pregnant wife telling me that her throat was burning because from all the ashes and the smoke. That plus not having gas, not having potable water, I was left with a really difficult choice. And the difficult choice was whether I needed to evacuate again. And it's just the pressure of providing and protecting my family. It was really tough and it weighed on me. And I remember texting my friends because I was overwhelmed with the pressure and the stress. And at some point, I knew in my heart that we needed to move out again. And if you're expecting a 5th kid, that's the worst thing you could hear. I remember that night when I decided that we would move out, I was just overwhelmed with emotion. And I was sat there at the dinner table with my kids, and they don't know what's going on. We're packing up again, getting ready to go. And I remember just being so overwhelmed. And I've never had a breakdown moment like that in my life, but I remember breaking down in front of my family and almost yelling, I feel like a failure because I cannot keep you guys safe. And in all the emotions of carrying the weight was just flowing through me. It was definitely the lowest point of the year. And I remember my second born, so amazing. Nobody asked her to do this. She saw me weeping at the table. She went and wrote on a piece of paper. And she handed it to me and she says, "You're a great dad." And of course, I wept again. We move out, and just add insult to injury, my whole family gets norovirus. Everyone's throwing up everywhere. By the way, I'm only telling you half the story. There's a lot more that happened. Finally, potable water comes back, gas comes back, and we move back home. The day after we moved back, my wife goes into labor, and my son is born on January 16th. I tell you this story. This story has marked me for the whole year, and I've shared it over and over again because there's so many lessons to draw from it. I learned the limits of my capabilities as a man. I could literally try everything I wanted to, and I could not produce the results that I wanted. I learned the power of community. Just having Rocky and her friends clean my house. I had another friend offer me air purifiers. But one of the things I learned most that I want to leave with us today is I learned that God is always on time. God is always on time. Not necessarily my time. That's key. On His time. He is always on time. Not in the way that I imagined, not in the way that I wanted, not when I thought I wanted it, but when it happens, and some of you guys will know, when it happens, you can only say, "You were on time, God." One of the skills we have to learn as believers, therefore, is to learn how to wait on God. Because He doesn't always move in our timetable and when we want. I learned this early on as a believer. When I first became a believer, you start praying, right? You're like, wow, you can ask God for things? That's amazing. And He'll answer. I remember, the first two were hitters. You said your first prayer, and it's like, whoa, God answered. How many of you guys know that third prayer? And nothing happens. What do you do with that, right? And I learned that, answered prayer is usually actually three answers. It's yes, no, or wait. And I learned that sometimes the measure of our maturity as believers is actually how well we can wait on God. How well we do in the in-betweens. Somewhere in between a need and provision. That is the test of our faith. I know that our church has been going through a waiting season. As you guys know, Christian talked about our building. We had this miraculous choosing of us. We were so stoked and excited, and we were getting ready to move that last week. And right the last week at Willard, and before we moved to the new place, obviously they moved down from the deal, and we were in limbo. And we went from this huge celebration to a place where it was like, oh, we have to wait. Our church is learning how to wait. And I feel some of you here are in a waiting season yourself. Some of you guys are waiting for provision. Some of you guys have been waiting for a position. Some of you guys waiting for a spouse. This waiting is normal to our Christian life. And I feel like the Lord wants to talk to us about waiting today. So I want to invite us into this passage where Jesus actually has people wait and what we can learn from that, okay? I want to invite us to read John 11 with me. I actually brought my Bible, so it's awesome. I've had this Bible since college. It's really tattered. It's awesome. All right, so I'm going to read if you guys can bear with me, there's a really beautiful story. I'm going to read the whole thing because I actually would have you leave here hearing the Bible than hearing anything I have to say, okay? This is the story of Lazarus. Okay, here we go. Now a certain man was ill, Lazarus of Bethany, the village of Mary and sister Martha. It was Mary who anointed the Lord with ointment and wiped her feet with her hair, whose brother Lazarus was ill. So the sister sent to him, saying, Lord, the one whom you love is ill. But when Jesus heard it, he said, this illness does not lead to death. It is for the glory of God, so that the Son of God may be glorified through it. Now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was ill, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Then after this, he said to the disciples, let us go to Judea again. The disciples said, well, Rabbi, the Jews were just now seeking to stone you. Are you going there again? Jesus answered, are there not 12 hours in the day? If anyone walks in the day, he does not stumble, but he sees the light of this world. But if anyone walks in the night, he stumbles because the light is not in him. After saying these things, he said to them, our friend Lazarus has fallen asleep, but I go to awaken him. The disciples said to him, Lord, if he had fallen asleep, he's going to recover. Now Jesus had spoken of his death, but they thought that he meant taking rest and sleep. Then Jesus told them plainly, Lazarus has died, and for your sake I'm glad that I was not there, so that you may believe. But let's go to him. So Thomas, called the twin, said to his fellow disciples, let us also go, that we may die with him. Now when Jesus came, he found that Lazarus has already been in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off, and many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them concerning their brother. So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him, but Mary remained seated in the house. Martha said to Jesus, Lord, if you had been there, my brother would not have died. But even now I know that whatever you ask from God, God will give you. And Jesus said to her, your brother will rise again. Martha said to him, I know that he will rise again in the resurrection on the last day. Jesus said to her, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me, though he die, yet shall he live. And everyone who lives and believes in me shall never die. Do you believe this? She said to him, yes, Lord, I believe that you are the Christ, the Son of God, who is coming into the world. When she had said this, she went and called her sister Mary, saying in private, the teacher is here and is calling for you. And when she heard it, she rose quickly and went to him. Now Jesus had not yet come to the village, but was still in one place where Martha had met him. And when the Jews who were with her in the house, consoling her, saw Mary rise quickly and go out, they followed her, supposing that she was going to the tomb to weep there. Now when Mary came to where Jesus was and saw him, she fell at his feet, saying, Lord, if you had been here, my brother would not have died. When Jesus saw her weeping, and the Jews had come with her, also weeping, he was deeply moved in his spirit and greatly troubled. And he said, where have you laid him? And they said to him, Lord, come and see. And Jesus wept. So the Jews said, see how he loved him. But some of them said, could he who opened the eyes of the blind man also have kept this man from dying? Then Jesus, deeply moved again, came to the tomb. It was a cave, and a stone laid against it. Jesus said, take away the stone. Martha, the sister of the dead man, said to him, Lord, by this time there's going to be an odor, for he has been dead 4 days. And Jesus said, did I not tell you that if you believed, you would see the glory of God? So they took away the stone, and Jesus lifted up his eyes and said, Father, I thank you that you have heard me. I knew that you always hear me, but I said this on account of the people standing around me, that they may believe that you have sent me. When he had said those things, he cried out with a loud voice, Lazarus, come out. The man who died came out, his hands and feet bound with linen strips, and his face wrapped with a cloth. And Jesus said to them, unbind him and let him go. Oof, what a story. Beautiful story, powerful story. One of the most powerful miracles witnessed in the Gospels when Jesus actually raises from the dead. Basically, Lazarus is sick, and they're like, Jesus, you're a healer, you should come. And he doesn't come immediately. I want to draw attention to what I think is such a pivotal verse that the writer actually makes notes to denote. He says, when Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus, so when he heard that Lazarus was ill, get this, he stayed 2 days longer in the place where he was. Isn't it interesting that they make a note of that? When you call for help, you're expecting immediate to come, right? 911. But the author actually makes a note that Jesus intentionally stays 2 days later. What does that tell me? The waiting is intentional. Jesus is actually setting it up so that they have to wait. Some of us, when we're in a waiting season, we have this narrative in our head that God has forgotten. It's like, you ever send a text out and they don't respond? I, unfortunately, with 5 kids, I'm like, my turnaround time is so bad these days. It's like anywhere from 30 seconds to 1 week. It's bad. I feel bad for Sue and Christian. Their turnaround time can be up to 2 weeks. It's bad, But some of us, think God's like that. Like we sent a message out, but did you get it, God? Did you hear? And what I'm getting from this passage is that the waiting is not accident. The waiting is intentional. Jesus is actually leaning into the waiting. He's actually setting it up so that everyone around him has to wait, which tells me that waiting is a tool that God uses for us. Waiting is a common theme in the Bible. As you know, he made the Hebrews wait years before he delivered them out of Egypt. After he told Joseph he'd be second in command, he made him wait for years. After David was anointed king, he made him wait another 16 years or so before he would be king. Waiting is part of God's toolkit that he uses often for his people. So if you're waiting on something today, church, can I just let you know that it's not an accident? That God intentionally sometimes uses the waiting for our formation and shaping of our lives. Then the question is, how do we partner with God in the waiting? One of the temptations in our waiting is to be so disillusioned and so disappointed that we just give up. How many of you guys feel that temptation sometimes? We can go from wait to impatience to disappointment to disillusionment. And I feel that there's something in this passage that I want to show in terms of why does God have us wait and how do we actually partner with him in the wait. So I want to highlight a few things that I want us to take away in terms of if you're in a waiting season as a church, what do you do in the waiting? The first is waiting forms the theater of our faith. I'm going to explain what I mean by that. I just love this response. So Jesus goes out, right? Finally, after 2 days, he goes out. And people hear that he's finally approaching the town where Lazarus is, okay? Here we go. Now, when Jesus came, he found out that Lazarus was already in the tomb 4 days. Bethany was near Jerusalem, about 2 miles off. And many of the Jews had come to Martha and Mary to console them. Hear this. So when Martha heard that Jesus was coming, she went and met him. But Mary remained seated in the house. I just love this little detail. Both of them experienced Lazarus' death. Martha goes out as soon as she hears Jesus is coming. But Mary remains seated. What interesting reactions in terms of differences. I mean, Martha, just A+ disciple. No offense in her heart. Just as soon as she hears Jesus is coming, she just runs. But Mary remains seated. I find her response so much more like my response. It's interesting because her response isn't evil. The Bible doesn't say it's bad. She is merely hesitating. Sometimes when we're waiting on God, there is just hesitation, right? She is somewhere, she's in a liminal place. She is somewhere between hope and disappointment. She's somewhere between trust and distrust. She's somewhere between, I know you're good, and can I trust you? And that hesitation causes us to think about what is actually in our hearts. Waiting exposes the condition of our faith. It actually exposes it. I remember this one time, waiting actually exposed my own heart. I'm going to share a funny nickname that my friends used to give me that you should not share outside this room. My friends used to call me the island hopper, not because I loved the Hawaiian Islands, but because I had so many girlfriends. Please don't tell anybody this. Except for, shut the live stream down. But that was like when I was a young man. And I remember I used girlfriends because I had a bad upbringing, and I used girlfriends to tell me who I was and to make me feel confident as a man. But at some point in my college life, I became more healed, and the Lord started radically changing my life. And I stopped dating for a long time, which was really healing. And I started leading a college ministry, the only college ministry in my campus, which was pretty phenomenal. We saw people saved. We saw people discipled. It was like one of the highlights of my life. But as my fruit began to increase, my loneliness also started to increase as well. Because I realized that God started giving me a vision for marriage, not just girlfriends. And I desired like a partner in life. It's funny, I actually started learning how to cook in college because I anticipated that I would cook for my kids. They are now the beneficiaries of those skills, I'll tell you that right now. Anyway, one year, I remember feeling, if you're single, sorry if this is hitting, you ever feel super lonely? Yeah. Thank you. It hurts, right? It's like, man, it hurts. I remember one night, I guess I feel bad as a dude, but I just felt super lonely. And I just remember actually, it was night, all my roommates went to sleep, and I remember confronting God. I was like, God, you gave me the desires, and I'm waiting for a spouse. But I feel so lonely, and you're not providing, and I'm just waiting and waiting and waiting. What gives? And I wasn't super charismatic at the time, but I remember really clearly, I heard God's voice speak to me in the middle of the night. I was asking him, when will I get married? And I felt the Holy Spirit say, Phil, you're already married to me. And I remember he was highlighting how I had idolized that in my heart. I had made that so important in my heart that I became disappointing. There's something in the waiting which stuff comes out. You see, the problem with waiting is not impatience. Some of us think, I just need to be more patient. Actually, impatience is a mask for the deeper things. It masks our need for control. It masks our loves. It masks our anxieties. It masks our idols. And waiting, God was using that waiting to show me that I had made an idol. I still had made an idol of women. And if it weren't for that, I would not have been able to offer Esther the gift of a heart that did not make her my idol. And one of the most important things I can offer my wife is that I love God more than I love her. Because if I need her to fulfill the things that only God can, both of us are going to be utterly disappointed. Waiting forms the theater of our faith because it gives us the opportunity to see what lies underneath. And sometimes God lets us wait so that we can see those things. You know that it's not so that he can see those things. He sees them, but do I see them? And God uses waiting to show the theater of our faith. Amen? So if you're here and you're waiting, can I just suggest to you, what have you learned about yourself? Are you going to, don't squander this waiting. What are you learning about yourself? So waiting forms a theater of our faith. Number 2, waiting is an invitation for intimacy. Waiting is an invitation for intimacy. One of my favorite parts of this passage is so I told you that Mary hesitated, but finally she gets up Okay, she finally gets up. And as you remember from the passage, she goes to Jesus and says, Lord, Lord, if you had been here, Lazarus would not have died. If you had been there. And I just love that passage because it's so raw. That's why I love the Bible. It's not glossy. There's just human emotion. It is the collision of a heart that is somewhat disappointed, met with a God that claims he can do all things. And there are questions in her heart. It says, Lord, if you had been here, Lazarus would not have died. And as you know, what I love about Jesus' response is he doesn't give cookie-cutter answers. He weeps too. Like he actually feels her pain. There's something beautiful about waiting, that pain that happens. I remember when we lost the building. When we lost the building here, I was in a funk for 2 days, just personally, 'cause we had our hopes up, and I was just grieving. I was grieving opportunity, the loss of opportunity, grieving all the work that went in, grieving what it meant for our church and our community and all the things. I remember being sad, and I remember also sad because I felt kind of embarrassed. I was like, we made a big announcement, and Christian talked about it. I don't know if we want to make an announcement. I felt kind of embarrassed that we told you we were moving in, and we had to send an email saying we don't got church this week because we're homeless. And so I was grieving, I was embarrassed, and that Sunday, thank God, Christian and Sue was like, let's get the leaders together, let's pray. That's what we should do. And we're praying, we're just bringing our heart before God. And I remember the Spirit of God was in we had a lot of leaders in our group. And Lamar, shout out to Lamar. He's been just so clutch, doing all the examinations for the building, on our business strategy team. And he just had a fire and an unction from God. Where something blurted out within him. He says, we don't even want the building. I'm going to paraphrase, bro. He says, we don't want the building, we want you. We want you. And there's just this holy roar. We're like, we don't want anything, we just want you, God. And the building was an excuse to lure us closer to himself. I've been telling people that when we said yes to the building, something came alive in our church in terms of the apostolic entrepreneurial spirit. But when we had a no, I felt something else came alive. I felt that our love for God came alive. I felt that our dependence on God came alive. You see, waiting is an invitation for intimacy. Waiting makes us ask questions like Mary did. Where were you? You could have saved Lazarus. And the questions that come out when you're waiting, you ask questions and you begin wrestling with God. How many of you guys have wrestled with God before? The thing about wrestling is that some of us think of wrestling as negative, right? But when you think about two people wrestling, they're jousting for position. But inherent in wrestling is intimacy. You ask questions that you wouldn't have otherwise asked. And something tells me that the Lord set this up so that Mary would actually draw near. Sometimes the Lord puts us in waiting seasons so that we would draw near to him. More than the gift that he wants to give us, he wants our hearts. And if there's anything I've learned is that the hands of one who can actually receive the gifts of God is one who loves him above all else. Because so often we will make the things that we want an idol. And we will conflate the gift with the giver. We will take the gift and forget the giver. We will seek his hands before we seek his face. Waiting is an invitation for intimacy. And if you're waiting on something, I just want to encourage you, God is waiting for you in the waiting room. He's not intimidated by your questions. He wasn't intimidated by the questions of Mary. He was ready. He wants that connection. Waiting is an invitation for intimacy. The last one is waiting is an opportunity to be surprised by God's goodness. How many of you guys know that when God provides, I'm going to get a lot of amens for this one. How many know when God provides, it's almost never in the way that we imagine? Right? It's almost never. I know a lot of you guys have so many stories. Matt shared a story of the fifth kid as well. That's crazy. It's almost never in the way that we imagined. I mean, if you read this, we have the benefit of reading this passage from the end to the beginning, right? How many, if you guys didn't know the end, how many of you guys would go, I bet you Jesus is going to raise him from the dead? Right? There's no way you would have known that. And then I thought to me, okay, Jesus is trying to teach them something. He's trying to make his people confident in his goodness. And so the question becomes, just put your critical hat on for a second. If you didn't know the outcome of this passage, that Lazarus was rise from the dead, what would your mindset have to be in order to not be surprised by God's provision? What would your mindset have to be? I'll tell you a few things that come to mind. I'd have to give up my sense of knowing what God would provide. Some of us are so fixated on this thing. I'd have to give up my sense of what God provides. I'd have to give up my sense of how God is going to provide, how it's going to work out, who's going to be involved. And I have to give up my sense of when God is going to provide. I actually have to give up all those things in order for me to not be surprised by God's provision. But the one thing I'm not called to give up is confidence in his goodness. Confidence in his goodness. Because if there's anything I learned in my life, is that God's goodness always comes through. Not necessarily in the way we imagined, not when we imagined, not what we imagined, but it comes through. I remember this one time where this was evidence in my life. I want to share a story from the birth of my fourth kid. No fires this time. This is my son, Titan. And I was with Esther in the delivery room. We're holding him and enjoying this moment. And while we were there, I get a phone call. And I look at the caller ID, and I show it to Esther. And she goes, pick it up. Now, you have to understand the gravity of that. I'm simply trying to enjoy the special moment of holding my newborn child. But who was on the call was my friend Bailey. Bailey was a childhood friend of mine. We grew up. Both of us came to faith. And he was so instrumental in my own development of faith. He had a radical encounter with God. He taught me, he prayed for me, he prophesied over me, he taught me the ways of the Spirit. He was a huge influence in my life to where I am today. But at some point, Bailey struggled in his life. His parents were divorced, and that set a deep-seated depression in his life that he could never shake. And at some point in his life, he started to walk away from God. And I knew because he started ignoring everybody, ignoring calls, ignoring me, and he started drinking. And at some point, he left everybody, left the church, left his family, and became an alcoholic. I had not talked to him in over 6 years at that point. And here I was, at the day my son was born, getting a call from him. So I pick up and I go, what's up, Bailey? And he says, hey, Phil. I was like, what's going on, man? And he says, Phil, I'm coming out of the hospital right now. And I was like, why are you coming out of the hospital, Bailey? He said, I've been drinking so much that my liver got shot and I fell unconscious. And I've been in the hospital for the last week. And he began to tell me that while he was in the hospital, he had hit rock bottom. And that he realized he had hit rock bottom so much that he needed to turn his life towards God again. And somewhere in the unconscious place of the hospital, he said to himself, There's only two people I want to call in the world right now when I come out. It's my friend from Kansas City, and it's you, Phil. And I decided to call you. And I have been waiting for Bailey to come home to God for years. And despite anything I would do, there's nothing I could do. And I was like, what are the chances of Bailey calling me on the day my son was born? And I remember the Spirit of God just put this unction in me where I said to Bailey, I was like, Bailey, it's not an accident that you're calling me on the day my son is born. Just as God has ordained new life in my family, you are calling me today because He is giving you new life today. And he is just weeping and weeping and weeping. And that was such a highlight of the birth. I was just shocked at God's goodness. God's goodness never comes in the way that we expect, nor when we expect. And He's so good. You know, this whole, Christian mentioned it, but this whole building thing, it actually might turn back towards us at some point, you know, which is crazy. But in my heart, I feel so free of the results right now. Like, I don't really care, you know. I just feel that no matter how it's going to end up, the reason is not because I'm in confidence in us. The reason is because if anything I learned from the fires or this whole process is that I've become confident in God's goodness. I've become confident in God's goodness more than me. You know what I realize is that we're anxious waiting for God because we are playing checkers. And God is seated on the throne because He's playing chess. He's doing things that we would never have done. I'm going to just tell you right now, the lease agreement for this building is probably 2 times better than we had before, which is insane to me. I was preparing this message, and this phrase came to mind. I'm so confident in God's goodness because the arc of the universe bends towards His goodness. If anything, the more time goes on, it is more time to prove His goodness. And if you're sitting here and you're waiting on God, and if our church is sitting here waiting on God, can I tell you something today? That if the story is not good, then God has not written the final chapter. He has not written the final chapter because the arc of the universe bends towards His goodness, and God is always on time. Come on, church. Amen. All right, worship team, can you guys come up? That was actually my last line in the sermon. Can we stand in response? I know we're running a little short on time, but I just felt led to have a few responses for people in this place. I know we've been talking about us waiting on God, but this first invitation is for some of you guys, is that I believe actually God's been waiting on you. I believe you're hearing this and you're here and somebody brought you here to church and you don't know why you're here, but you're here for a specific reason. Can I just say that God's been waiting for you? God's been waiting for you to come home. God's been waiting for you to come to know Him. He's a God who loves you and wants a relationship with you. And if you give your life to Him and confess your sins, He will give you life and life eternal. And so if that's you, I want you to talk to a friend that brought you. But if you want to get prayer, we're going to have prayer people here to the right. So that's the first. The second is that I want to talk to people that feel like Mary in this room. The people that are in this liminal space of hesitation. somewhere between hope and disappointment, somewhere between doubt and faith, I want to invite you to take one of the responses from this passage, which is to draw near to God. I want to encourage you, He is not afraid of your questions and your disappointment. Christian talked about it last week, of bringing our disappointments before God. He wants your heart more than the gift He wants to give you. So I want to invite you, if that's you, to begin talking with God. If you need prayer for our prayer ministry, that's available to you guys. So we're going to spend some time in worship, but for a church that's waiting, I want to invite you to respond in the way that you feel led to. So let's worship.